So I've never done one of these before, but after seeing Scream 2022 or Scream 5, whatever you want to call it, which I had very high expectations for, maybe unfortunately, but I really do like a lot about it. There's a lot to like. The meta elements of it are very well done. And there's some really good performances. They generally do a pretty good job with the mixture of the legacy characters with the newer characters. But there's one huge change coupled with what would be a minor change that I think would help the overall movie, both internally and then going forward. So this is your spoiler warning. If you don't want to know any of these ideas, then walk away now. But like I said, I love the film. The overall direction from the directors, the new people who are not Wes Craven, is really good. Um, Brian Tyler, who I don't generally like, did a really good job. I was really not happy that Marco Beltrami wasn't coming back to do the score, but they paid a lot of homage, and of course they used the Dewey theme and the Red Right Hand, so they got a lot of stuff into it that really made it feel like the old stuff. But and here's the last spoiler warning, the biggest problem is the overall motivation. And when you think back to the original movie, it really felt like you were stepping into a narrative that there had been a previous movie. Like there could have been a prequel that detailed all the stuff that you later learn throughout this movie, and then tying all the way through the trilogy of Sydney's mother, the Loomis family, all of these people with all this stuff happening, but you don't know it. You don't know it. You learn it as you go in the very first movie, and it worked. Narratively, they found great ways of telling that part of the story without you having seen any of it, right? And it played into the overall narrative in a really great way. This big spoiler here, and it's not a huge spoiler now, because if you've seen the movie, you probably know that the main lead character who comes back to Woodsboro is Billy Loomis's illegitimate or unknown daughter that they reveal had learned she was Billy Loomis's father much earlier in the narrative. But for my purposes, and the big change would be because they keep it a secret. Like her own sister, who's presumably about 10 years younger, doesn't know that she's Billy Loomis's daughter. Yet, what you come to find out by the end of the movie, it becomes a huge part of the overall motive in the killings, is everybody seemed to know it anyway. So why hide it? Why pretend that because we know it in the audience, we learn it pretty quickly, but they only drib and drab it out through the movie, and it doesn't make any sense narratively. It would have made more sense if, like the first one, it started with the ramifications of it. And a huge chunk of it would have been that she was gone and her younger sister, who's still there in Woodsboro in high school and has the friend group that is the primary people involved, they, everybody knows. So it's not this huge secret. There's no point in having it be a huge secret. It wasn't a huge secret that Maureen Prescott in the first movie, because that was part and parcel of it. And that would be the interesting thing at a meta level to talk about, is the implications of back then when there were no cell phones and the only stuff was just over the news. Now all of it 25 years later is online, all the other platforms, YouTube, TikTok, you name it, wherever they're getting their information from, coupled with there's this not so big secret now, but the implications of what it means. And so if you make that change, and maybe not even set it that far back, because the time element doesn't really matter. It could have just come out like within the last year or two. That's how long she's been gone. And her sister's still mad at her because she thinks she's embarrassed her, that kind of stuff. And then the other kind of minor change that goes along with that, but I think it plays really well with it, is the first kill isn't a kill. And I think they're being really different by not killing her off in the first scene, because it becomes part of the plot, is that the killers convince the older sister that her sister might be involved because she survived. So it doesn't work that well, because there's no reason to believe that. But if, then this is the other minor changes, you have her setting up in the initial scene, the initial kill scene, a friend, and they're sitting there talking and they're doing the standard movie night thing that you've seen in every other movie. And they don't even do that. They just jump straight into she's home alone and the call. Instead of, there's no setup. You could easily have the setup. They're talking about that she's still pissed off about her sister leaving, and how does that play against their movie choices. They don't even want to talk about the stab stuff because it's all related to that. So you could have that really playing with that in a very metatextual way, but also within the movie, and would help set up the narrative internally within the movie. But it also mean that going forward, because I can easily see that the ramifications are supposed to be, oh, now the secret's out that she's the serial killer's daughter. And what does that mean? Well, I'd rather them have just had that, and you'd have that set up, because the other problem is they write out the mother. There's no idea who the stepfather was for the second daughter. So you have some options there, but there's nothing set up and there's nothing to carry it forward. And it would have cleaned up the movie narratively so that you could focus more on the friends. You could build it out a little bit more and take your time with some of it, because a couple of the people are killed off really quick, and it just kind of, and it's okay. I mean, most of the kills stuff is really good for the most part, but I think it would have really helped narratively with the whole plot of the movie, because that was one of the biggest problems most people are complaining about, is that their pacing is terrible. And I think that Wes Craven brought that. He was economical. If you ever watch any of his movies, he's economical at the storytelling elements that make it easier to understand. Plus, he was very good at making sure that everything made sense. I mean, even if it was crazy and seemed illogical, the motives are crazy or their reasoning's crazy, it didn't matter. He was able to somehow make sure that you still could buy it, that there was still a believability factor. And some of that's thrown out the window because of this. And I would say that mainly because, okay, there's this big secret, but then at the end of the movie, you come to learn, oh no, everybody knew it anyway. So what difference did it make? And that's a huge plot hole to me. I mean, that's one of those things I think people are kind of overlooking when they're thinking about this movie. As it's, they're, none of them are bulletproof. Most of them all have there's huge, they change things, errors, there's problems. But in terms of the mystery of this movie, it becomes kind of ridiculous, because it becomes pretty obvious right out of the gate what's going on, because they're trying to keep this thing a secret instead of the other way around, where, because if everybody knows it, then it becomes kind of, okay, there could be a lot of other people involved, or what it would give real reason other than just, well, it could be anybody. And they say that, and it's kind of ridiculous. So I have some other ideas that kind of go along with this, where this would go forward, but I don't want to talk about it because I don't want to get too many spoilers. This is not a big one. I was not annoyed by the fact that they made this. I think it's a good for a going forward point. So at this point, you have this the daughter of Billy Loomis, who could become the new Sidney Prescott. But I think the other problem that it kind of baked into it is it didn't have that natural element of Gail and Dewey were authority and media and the victim. There's none of that in this. There's nothing carrying that forward. They were trying to do that in Scream 4 with the, I don't want to spoil Scream 4 if you haven't seen it, but they were trying to do that. Of course, they ended with how the way they ended it. But it, even then, it wasn't going to be able to carry forward the way I don't think they thought. I remember seeing Williamson's original ideas, and they were kind of off the wall, and that's what he ended up taking to make the movie Fall, or the TV show Following, which was pretty good. But anywho, that would be my big change. I think that would radically improve it. It would make it a cleaner narrative and help to carry the series forward if you wanted it to. If you want to know more, hit me up. I'd love to hear your ideas.